Marijuana Nation, apologies for the lack of a show yesterday and for how late today's episode is getting up. I'm a single dad part of the week, and I've decided to keep my 4-year-old at home when she's with me because I don't think it's safe with the pandemic to send kids back to school, especially 4-year-olds. I've been trying to figure out a childcare solution that would allow me to work while also keeping my kiddo safe, and this week I was just not able to get anything in place. So we had no show yesterday. Apologies for that. I'm going to do my best to figure something out, but right now I'm not sure quite yet what it's going to look like. I might just need to get up at 3 a.m. a couple times a week, so a pox upon this timeline. This episode of Marijuana Today Daily is brought to you by our friends over at the Atlantic Farms Medical Marijuana Dispensary of Portland, Maine, which is located right down the street from where I live and is known as being the medical marijuana dispensary that is also a gas station, where you can buy things like snacks and drinks alongside medical marijuana products. Check them out over at theatlanticfarms.com. That's theatlanticfarms.com. Good morning, Marijuana Nation. It's Thursday, September 3rd, 2020, and you're tuned in to episode 976 of Marijuana Today Daily. I'm your host, Shay Gunther, and I'll be walking you through today's marijuana news and headlines. As always, we have a full and busy day of cannabis news in our hands, so let's jump right into it. We kick off today's show in Massachusetts, where the state's Attorney General Maura Healey just announced the opening of 2 available spots on the Cannabis Control Commission, with applications now being accepted. The Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission is a 5-person board that oversees the state's legal marijuana industry, both adult use and medical, and has had 2 of its members, Britt McBride and Kay Doyle, leave this year, with Doyle resigning in April and McBride just announcing the news of her departure last week. Remaining on the commission is Chair Stephen Hoffman, as well as Commissioners Jen Flanagan and Shalene Teitel, who is actually a former regular on our weekly show, Marijuana Today. If you or anyone you know is interested in becoming Massachusetts' new Cannabis Control Commissioner, swing on over to Mass Live for a full read on this story and for a link through to the application itself, which is being held open until September 8th. The city of Los Angeles, California is being sued by 3 companies that unsuccessfully applied for marijuana business licenses last year during a round set aside for social equity program participants. The 3 companies are upset over losing a license retroactively after it was awarded due to the shop's location allegedly being too close to a preschool, and say that it was actually because they spoke out about perceived problems with LA's licensing program. Los Angeles has not had an easy time of rolling out their legal marijuana program, so this is really just another bit of potential woe for the city to add to the heap. If understanding LA's markets makes you better at your job, this is probably not a bad one to dip into fully today. As always, we have all the news we cover linked to on our website at mjtodaydaily.com. Kyle Yeager wraps up our top picks today with news that a full 60% of respondents to a poll in Washington, D.C. say they support a psychedelics decriminalization ballot measure, with just 24% opposed. The poll asked likely D.C. voters about their thoughts on Initiative 81, which would remove criminal penalties for substances like ayahuasca and psilocybin mushrooms. One of the exciting points on this story is the fact that support for the measure has risen 9 points since a previous poll in April, suggesting that people are perfectly fine with the idea once they learn more about it. If you're tracking the development of the psychedelics market, I'd read this one in full today. Those are the top stories for today. It's time for Marijuana Today Daily Headlines Blitz. Before we blitz it in headlines, let's quickly thank our sponsor, the Atlantic Farms Medical Marijuana Dispensary of Portland, Maine, which is located right down the street from where I live and is known as being the medical marijuana dispensary that is also a gas station, where you can buy things like snacks and drinks alongside medical marijuana products. Everyone behind the Atlantic Farms is committed to advancing the role that marijuana plays in enhancing and improving people's lives. They focus hard on making sure their products are both top quality while also being affordable. A difficult line to balance that the Atlantic Farms has become expert at, with long-running and loyal vendor and supply relations all over Maine. If you have not yet had the pleasure of visiting the Atlantic Farms of Portland, Maine yet, make sure you do. And while you're there, you can even top off your gas tank. Learn more over at their website at theatlanticfarms.com. That's theatlanticfarms.com. All right, time for the Blitz. Ben Adlin over Marijuana Moments nicely updates the scene out of California's legislature as it just wrapped up its legislative session, passing a number of marijuana and hemp-related bills while leaving some other proposed industry bills behind. Ben's story looks at some of the new pieces of legislation passed, including one that would set up a so-called appellation system, where marijuana products grown in certain regions retain the sole rights to be labeled as such. Similar to how wines like Bordeaux can only be made using grapes grown in the Bordeaux region of France. This is an especially big concern for farmers in the Humboldt region of California. Another bill passed freezes tax rate increases, which will be appreciated in California's tax-heavy market, while another removes state penalties for banks working with cannabis businesses, though of course federal restrictions remain here. This is a good one to dive into today fully as well. We have another Marijuana Moments with Kyle Yeager pitching in with a story on a poll in Mississippi showing strong support for a medical marijuana initiative that will show up on the ballot in November. In all, 81% of those polled supported medical marijuana as a general and broad concept. The cannabis question in Mississippi has been made a bit more complicated thanks to Republican fuckery, as conservative lawmakers passed their own version of a ballot measure that will put a much more restrictive medical question alongside the one that was actually generated by the people. So the poll here has to deal with that. Overall, 75% of those polled said they supported one question or the other, with 52% saying they'd vote for the version generated by the Citizens Initiative only, while 23% said they'd be voting only for the bullshit version pitched by Republican lawmakers. Pop over to Marijuana Moment for details and a deeper breakdown on those numbers. Marijuana Business Daily is a good chart of the week looking at the growth of Montana's legal medical marijuana program, which started up back in 2004 before being slowly gutted by, you guessed it, Republican lawmakers who chipped away at it legislatively until a 2016 ballot measure gave the industry new life. As the chart shows on this one, 2020 is expected to land between $90 and $105 million in medical marijuana sales in Montana, growing $20 million or so a year until 2024, when medical cannabis is pegged to bring home $140 to $155 million. As with all their charts, this one has lots of good background detail and context and is worthy of a full read if you have Montana on your radar. New Cannabis Ventures takes a look at some numbers from data analytics firm BDSA, showing the growth of legal cannabis sales in California, Oregon, Arizona, Colorado, and Nevada, where in July, $842 million flowed through legal cannabis stores, up 12% from June. This is another story I'd read in full as it nicely breaks things down state by state, also showing how things like different legal cannabis verticals are faring. New Cannabis Ventures keeps the news stick with another markets check-in, this time looking at Illinois, Maryland, and Massachusetts cannabis sales in July. In Illinois, which just launched legal adult use sales in January, just under $95 million in both adult use and medical sales were made, with the jump in July being particularly healthy. Maryland medical sales are up big over last year, jumping more than double on a month-to-month comparative basis, while Massachusetts sales have rebounded after a huge dip in April attributed to coronavirus closings. Another good one to read in full today. Mary Jane has one on the lighter side today with a story about a new documentary film about the presidency of Jimmy Carter, in which President Carter shares the story of how his son Chip, who was then 28 years old at the time, smoked a joint with singer and marijuana legend Willie Nelson on top of the White House back in the 1970s. The story of Willie smoking a joint on the White House has been well known for a while, but the fact that his session partner was Chip Carter hasn't been confirmed by the president until this new documentary, titled Jimmy Carter, Rock and Roll President. We end today with a story by Marijuana Business Daily poking around the recently announced resignation of John Prentice from the company Akerna, which just wrapped up a $45 million acquisition of Prentice's company, Ample Organics. This one might be worth a look today for the messiness in which it went down, as Prentice published a post on his own website calling out Akerna's leadership for their lack of abilities and detailing how he asked Akerna CEO Jessica Billingsley to resign. Those are the headlines and news for the day. I'll be back with you again tomorrow morning with another information-packed episode of Marijuana Today Daily. But in the meantime, if you have any stories to share or feedback to give, zip us an email to headlines@mjtodaydaily.com. And while you're clicking around the interwebs, swing over to our website at mjtodaydaily.com to find links to all the news we cover. Thanks to our sponsor, The Atlantic Farms, and two of our awesome patron listeners for the support that makes this show possible. To join the illustrious ranks of the patron listeners yourself, swing over to our website at mjtodaydaily.com and click on that big blue button at the top of the page that says Become a Patron. I'm your host, Jay Gunther. Thanks for tuning in and starting your day with marijuana today.
One take, Shay. One take.